This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com, where we produce a podcast and occasional videos about people, events, and locations of interest to those who live and work in Chicago, or just love the city many of us call home. Today we're going to take a short walking tour to explore some of the history of Montrose Beach. I drive my wife to work about 3 or 4 days a week from where we live west of Andersonville near Rose Hill Cemetery, down to Sable Lakeshore Drive to the Gold Coast, where she's director of the Lakeshore Music Studio, providing piano lessons for all ages. Her studio is just about 2 blocks from the Chicago History Museum, which is a repository of much of the history of this city. I'm something of a history buff myself and often mused about what the city looked like as it grew into the beautiful metropolis it is today. What I've come to learn is that most of Chicago looks the way it does by design, not by accident. Situated on the confluence of an important river and Great Lake, Chicago has good bones or good underlying important features, but it's been carefully crafted by human hands into the gem it is today. For a long time after dropping Julie off, I'd simply race back home to work and basically sit in front of my computer for hours. Then it occurred to me that, first of all, I need to get some exercise. So I started a habit of getting off the drive at Montrose and taking a walk for about 30 minutes or so. That's where I am today. As I walk around, I like to think about what was here before and why does this part of the city look the way it does. So I dug a little deeper into its history. I usually park near the harbor because the parking is free. But let's take a walk over to the beach. On our way, let's take a quick look at Cricket Hill, situated just north of Montrose Avenue and north of the harbor. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Chicago had a surprisingly active cricket scene. British and Canadian immigrants formed clubs, including the Wanderers Cricket Club in 1883. As the sport grew, the Chicago Park District began designating athletic fields for cricket. It's this activity that gives this area its name. Do you guys know what the name of this hill is and why it has that name?
I'm actually not sure.
Throw out a guess, Towels Hill. I do not know.
I don't.
Oh, okay.
Maybe Rubble?
I mean, a lot of people know. What did you say, Rubble?
Yeah.
That's a good guess, actually. It used to be a cricket field. So back in the 1880s and early 1900s, cricket for some reason was really big in Chicago, and the Park District decided to build some cricket fields here. And so this was actually a former cricket field, and hence the name Cricket Hill. This was built in 1950 from a bunch of debris from the Park District and landfill from other places in the city. And just here, so people often think it's natural. It's not. And it got its name not because of crickets, but because of cricket.
Because of cricket. Okay.
Now you know something you didn't know before I wandered up. This grass-covered man-made mound is about 55 feet above Lake Michigan at its tallest point. It was constructed in the early 1950s on the site of a former cricket field from felled trees and construction debris. The gently sloping mound has been used as a sledding hill in winter, a kite-flying hill in summer, a vantage point for lakefront festivals, and just a place to enjoy some height in an otherwise flat landscape. Right now I'm standing here at Montrose Beach, and in front of me is a long, wide stretch of sand that feels like it's always been part of Chicago. But the truth is, none of this is natural, not a grain of it. Montrose Beach is almost half a mile long, stretching from the north end, featuring a beach area reserved for dogs, to a smaller pier on the south end that juts into the lake from a section of beach surrounded by native grasses, reminiscent of what Chicago's lakeshore originally looked like. In the early 20th century, Chicago decided it wanted more lakefront and parkland, and the only way to get it was to make it. So the city, under the guidance of the Park District, began extending Lincoln Park northward. Massive amounts of landfill were brought in, using sand dredged from Lake Michigan and excavated soil from projects like tunnel construction, subways, and other major infrastructure projects. All of this beach and park is sitting on land that was built by hand, shaped by engineers, not Mother Nature, and expanded through one of the largest public works projects in the city's history. In the 1930s, the Work Progress Administration, established under Franklin Roosevelt, known commonly as the WPA, stepped in and accelerated the project. The WPA didn't just clean up the lakeshore, they created it. They sculpted this beach, built the original beach house in 1934, and shaped the peninsula that would become Montrose Harbor. Once that peninsula was established, it started trapping sand that traveled north along the lakefront from the Indiana dunes, causing the beach to grow wider and wider over the decades. To the west of this sandy beach is a grassy parkland. You'll notice something interesting. The park sits about 10 feet higher than the shore. There's this long concrete retaining wall that runs the entire length of the beach. When the WPA engineers built this land, they created the grassy park atop a compact fill designed to keep it dry and stable. But the beach needed to stay low, close to the waterline. So the park district built a high concrete wall to hold the park in place, prevent erosion, and protect it from storm surges. It's one of those features you stop noticing after a while, but once you know why it's there, it tells you a lot about why things look the way they do. Those visiting Leona Beach in Rogers Park might notice a similar, though smaller, retaining wall. That's the site of the annual Artists on the Wall event, where local artists paint colorful murals along the concrete. Let's take a few steps to the southeast of this concrete barrier along Montrose Beach. Now we're standing in front of one of my favorite summertime spots, the Dock. It's a casual outdoor restaurant looking very much like a Florida beach bar, but with a distinctive Midwest vibe that includes fried pierogi alongside fish tacos on the menu. Just steps from the sand, you can get a nice sweeping view of the gentle curve of the lake, looking north towards Loyola and Northwestern universities. From your table, you should be able to spot a large vintage pink-colored building. That's the Edgewater Beach Apartments and is the remnant of what's left over of the Edgewater Beach Hotel, a massive resort that featured that same distinctive pink color, demolished in about 1969. The Dock is a friendly place, and on a warm day, there's nothing better than sitting here and enjoying the water view, or in the evening, sipping a drink and listening to music while the sun sets and the waves roll in. But here's a little known fact. This beachfront hangout sits atop something most people would never imagine when they're here. Back in the 1950s and early 1960s, this wasn't an outdoor dining area. A building once stood on this spot that was the command and radar center for the Montrose Beach Nike missile site, part of a ring of Cold War defenses surrounding Chicago and other large cities. Soldiers worked here around the clock, scanning the skies for Soviet bombers, radar dishes rotated overhead, communication lines ran underground. Military trucks came and went. And yet the beach stayed open. Families were swimming and sunbathing just steps away from this restricted military zone. Chicagoans were enjoying summer, while inside this building, soldiers were preparing for a war everybody hoped would never come. Everyday life unfolding alongside apocalyptic global tensions. The missiles themselves weren't here at Montrose. This was the control site. The launch site, the actual missiles, were located about a mile south at Montrose Harbor. They were stored underground in long concrete magazines. If needed, a hydraulic elevator would lift them to the surface for firing. The Army separated the control and launch areas on purpose. If one was attacked, the other could still operate. Chicago's batteries originally held Nike Ajax missiles, then later the more powerful Nike Hercules missiles. Now, these were not anti-ballistic weapons, but rather intended to attack formations of incoming bombers, expected to come from the north through Siberia and over Canada, in a more conventional warfare, similar to what was experienced in World War II. It's sobering to think about that kind of potential devastating activity sitting quietly along families and beachgoers enjoying a beautiful summer day. Walking southeast from the beach house, there's a small wooded nature center, often referred to as the Magic Hedge or the Magic Circle. This was actually the site of the larger military base that included barracks and radar equipment. This area looks wild and natural today, but after the Nike site was decommissioned in 1965, the land was cleared. Over time, shrubs and volunteer plantings took hold. Local birders noticed that the honeysuckle, named Magic Hedge, left over from the military's landscaping, was attracting several birds, suddenly and in large numbers, including rare species that showed up regularly, giving the area its new name. What started as an accidental habitat is now one of the most important bird sanctuaries in the Midwest. Migratory birds discovered it and have continually used it for more than half a century as a welcome safe harbor, while winging their ways north and south. This is yet another example of how Chicago's engineered landscape keeps reinventing itself. Excuse me a minute. I just recorded a podcast about this area, and I was wondering if you guys were aware of the fact that this used to be a military base, and that there used to be missiles around this area, and that this was the base that controlled the missiles. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Are you interested?
What is that?
It was decommissioned in 1965, but it was during the Cold War. So there were 20 Nike missiles around the Chicago area to protect us from an invasion from the Soviet Union. And the actual base used to be right here, so I was just out here doing a little podcast about it, and I was looking here and thinking that this land is like on a hill here because that's where the barracks used to be. So it's probably the foundation is buried right there. And the actual control center used to be where the dock is over there, where the restaurant is. And
right there?
yeah, right there. Yeah, and they had radar, towers up here and stuff because they expected that if the Soviets invaded us, they would come over Canada down the Great Lakes and drop bombs on Chicago in a conventional war. We're not anti-ballistic missiles. They weren't anti-rocket missiles, but so you've never heard anything about it, right?
First
Yeah, so you should look it up. It's interesting. The actual missiles were at Belmont Harbor. And but they controlled them from here because they felt like if they bombed the missile site, the control center would still be intact, or vice versa. So
Is that something that they're trying to hide, or is it?
no, I mean it's kind of. I want to say it's well known. That's why I thought I'd ask you if you'd even heard of it. It's not that it's that was hidden. I mean, even at the time, people were aware of it because actually the missile silos, from what I understand, they would sometimes bring the missiles up just to be sure it worked. Just to be sure it worked. So they were buried about 40 feet underground, and then they would come up like on an elevator, and then they had guys that cranked them up, and they would crank them up. So people knew that they were here. It wasn't hidden. It just wasn't like overly publicized, But warfare changed very quickly. So between say 1950 and 1965, they were these were obsolete, So the military had planted these hollyhocks here. They're called magic hollyhocks. And so what happened was after they decommissioned this area, those hollyhocks started to grow sort of wild. And then some people came out and planted things and so on. And so all of a sudden, all these birds started coming.
So this is on complete accident?
Yeah, it's a complete accident. Yeah. And but it was because it was roped off, and people couldn't get into it for a long time. It just grew kind of wild, and the birds started stopping here. And of course, it's been 50, 60 years, and what am I talking about? It's been 70, 80 years. And so now it's really started to, the birds, they know this place, they come here, they stop here.
I learned about it in my class. We actually stopped here for one of my trips, and this is one of the last parts of land that dips out around the lakes when the birds fly over.
Yeah, exactly. But one other thing I'll share with you is that this is all man-made. Yeah, there's nothing here that you can see that is original to the shoreline. The shoreline actually went down to about Marine Drive. You know where Marine Drive is? The other side of Lakeshore Drive. Yeah. So the natural shoreline is on the other side of Lakeshore Drive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Put land all over?
This is all landfill, pretty much from downtown to here. But this was some of the last part, and they built this whole harbor and everything, and the beach. The beach is all.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense why it has a funny shape.
Yeah, well, it's all designed by engineers, So it's not that it's a funny shape; it's just that it's unnatural. Yeah, I mean, it has this nice curve to it, And
that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun. That's what I try to do in my program. Is just sort of I walk around here musing about this stuff. I think maybe other people are interested. So
Where do you post that?
it's Chicago Broadcasting Network. So if you just look for that, you'll find Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. This will be posted on YouTube. Finally, let's stop on the waterside here for a moment and take a look out across the lake toward the skyline. What buildings can you identify from here? On a clear day, you might be able to make out the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier or even the faint outline of the Indiana Dunes. How many cribs can you spot sitting out on the lake, bringing fresh water into the city? From this angle, the city looks calm and serene, but everything you see has a story behind it. The beach beneath your feet was built by engineers. The park behind you was raised from landfill. The restaurant you passed was once a Cold War command center. and the quiet bird sanctuary nearby grew out of land that once held radar towers and housed military personnel. Montrose Harbor is a reminder that places evolve. They carry layers of history, some visible, some buried, some forgotten, and all of them shape the way we experience Chicago today. And that's what I like to think about when I'm walking, how the landscape we take for granted came to be, and how every part of our city has a story, if you pause long enough to notice. This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at Chicago Broadcasting Network, inviting you to please take a moment to like or share this episode, and subscribe if you want to be alerted when new content is added. As always, if you require marketing or video production assistance for your business or organization, check out renoweb.net.